All right, week 3 wrap up episode. We are back. Pretty similar week to week 2. Lower scores. Not, I think only 2 teams were in the 130s. Stayed relatively low. A lot of surprising upsets. I thought that the biggest one, so I'll just start with the my matchup of the week last week was the battle of the cousins,
Yep.
Ross versus Lucas, and that ended up being the closest and best matchup. And I had Ross in a rout, and Lucas squeaks it out.
I think both of our matchups of the week were good because I had Libby and Tom, and they were actually closer at the 99 to 97 score. And Libby kind of went over that matchup in his letter. But I think both of our matchups of the week were pretty spot on and juiciness.
Yeah, and I did not get to all of Libby's letter. I stopped after the first paragraph. But I will say, after I switched my name and the GIF to Mr. Buttside, when I was looking back at transactional history and rankings and stuff like that and prep for this, it was hilarious every single time I saw Mr. Buttside dropped Cole Beasley.
I was doing the same thing. It's great. Thank you for picking a name. I feel like I'm hearing nothing at all, nothing at all, and then stupid sexy Flanders. So very, very nicely done. It's a good name.
So a lot of props to the guys. I know I gave them crap last week, but that was an effort to have something this great come out of it. And I mean, nothing beats a so stupid, it's funny all the time joke. And I think Mr. Buttside, absolutely A plus.
Yep.
So that's, I mean, like I said, week 2, week 3, relatively the same. Still kind of feeling out teams. Did you have a runaway MVP from a player perspective for this week?
From a player perspective, I feel like it's the only good thing about my team, which is Lamar Jackson. He's just been a complete force this year, contract year, playing back at MVP level. I think he regressed a bit last year, but he has been dominating this year. It's not helping my team, but I feel like I have to be excited about something about my team.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you lost, even though he put up 38 points. So I don't know if I can give him MVP. I went with Devontae Smith on Libby's team, 28
That's a good
points.
choice.
Kind of came out of nowhere. I think he had 10 points in week 2, 0 week 1. I don't believe he played in week 1. I mean, he might as well have not played. He had 0 points. But I think he's going to be pretty solid going forward. The Eagles look like a powerhouse.
Yeah.
And it's just how many targets is he going to get stolen from him by A.J. Brown? But, man, I think the dollars worked out. But if you could have gotten Devontae and A.J. on the same team as your 1-2 wide receivers, that would have been pretty sweet going forward. And you probably, if you really wanted to have gone for the whole offense and just spent probably $100 to get Hurts, Devontae, and AJ. That would have been a pretty sweet lineup. But yeah, Devontae Smith. I got a couple of things on past waiver wire stuff that worked out. There was one, I'll just allude to it, and hopefully you know the answer to it. There was one that was just an incredible waiver wire pickup.
I've got it written down. It's Mac Hollins for you, right? Yeah. That was a guy that
The only reason why I won the week.
Yeah, exactly. And he was my dark horse MVP. But just like a dude that comes out of nowhere who gives you the point differential in your lineup that you need to win. That is just a complete nobody. Yeah.
And it was all in like the last 2 drives for the Raiders. He had I think he had like 9 points or something going into the fourth quarter and ended with 25. Not as big of a reach for me because Hunter Renfrow was out for the game. So I essentially just picked up his replacement and started him as opposed to starting Hunter Renfrow. So it's not like I was just
You're continuing to buy into the Raiders offensive unit
Raiders.
to drive your fantasy team, and it's working.
The NFL's only 0-3 team, and I have based my entire fantasy football team around them. So
That's parody.
that's about as good as it gets from a what is that person thinking standpoint. I also then gave myself the worst waiver
For Cole
wire pick for
Beasley.
the week. What? Cole?
Was it
Well,
Cole
I
Beasley?
didn't pay anything for Cole. I just picked him up just to see how if Brady would have gone off and give him like 8 targets,
Sure.
I might as well keep him. He was 0. No, I $25 for Mostert.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm really wide receiver or running back depleted, so I was willing to pay more for him. I think the next highest bid was like 15. So
Yeah.
yeah, probably overpaid by a bit, but in that case, you don't know. The other worst one was Seth picking up Sterling Shepard for $5,
Ouch.
and then he tore his ACL walking off the field.
Yeah, that's rough.
But he did make up for it in my look ahead by dropping Sterling Shepard and picked up Marvin Jones this morning.
Junior. Yeah, that's and like I think all of our advice for waiver wires worked out really badly last week, which maybe that was intentional, but like none of the players that we suggested that were going to be good were any good at all. So that was cool.
Yeah, I think I kept Matt Collins a secret on that one. Either that or I had already picked him up. I don't remember. But
It's a competitive league.
I was. And then Dortch, the wide receiver for the Cardinals. I have a going forward that he might be solid $7. I don't remember who picked him up, but
I think Seth got him, and he looks like a guy that you would create a player on Madden. Like that's the kind of name that you would get. And I had no idea who he was either. And then I looked at his stat line for the year, and I'm like, whoa, okay, Greg
he is
Dortch.
actually pretty solid because they're the
Rondale Moore is out.
starting to realize that AJ Green is 100 years old, and they probably shouldn't use him anymore. Did you have any more waiver wire stuff?
Nope.
Yeah, waiver wire definitely slowed down a bunch this week. I even looked at it this morning because I don't think did you put a bid in?
Yeah, I put in $20 for Robert Woods and nobody else bid for him, and then $10 for Isaiah McKenzie. I'm just trying to change as much of my team up as I can.
Yeah, your team's pretty bad.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, even the people that were picked up are probably going to be inconsequential. And I looked at the other players that are still on waivers, and it is a graveyard. 12-team league, usually the waivers are pretty depleted, but this seems way different than past years. There hasn't really been that one running back injury either, and people racing for the backup. So best matchup. Do you have a best matchup team v team?
I do. And it's like a combination of our best matchups for last week, but I have Libby versus Ross as the best matchup for this week. Libby's trending up. Ross has got one loss on his resume, but I think it's a prove it game again for Libby and for Ross. Like, is he actually going to lose 2 in a row? I don't know, but their projections are pretty close.
Yeah, projections are close. They're also the only 2 teams with winning records facing each other.
That's true.
So, really good matchup there. We didn't talk about I think there's been 2 trades so far in the league.
Yeah.
Libby got Tua from Stefan for Damian Harris. I believe Libby started Tua last week, 11 points. That didn't work out. Damian Harris had 11 points. Stefan did not start him. And Stefan also threw into that trade DK Metcalf, who had 14 points, and Libby did not start him. So I think Libby pulled a fast one on here. I'm not going to say there was, any weird stuff happening, but that does seem like a lot of value for Damian Harris. Most Patriot running backs aren't worth $1 on the waiver wire. So
they're at best a flex play.
Yeah. And I mean, DK Metcalf is like the only good offensive player on a terrible team. So
I thought that trade was pretty lopsided too. I didn't want to be the one to say it, but it was. And then the other trade was me. I had Joe Burrow on my bench, and like I said, just need to change things up on my team. So I found a guy in Tom who has a bad quarterback now in Russell Wilson, and I tried to just get something back and change things up. So we'll see how that one works out.
Yeah, and we'll get to Joe Burrow later on. I also had Ross and Libby as my matchup for the week. Similar reasons as you. Another good one is Drew versus Wes. Um, not a, I mean, close in projected. Drew has Carson Wentz as his quarterback. Like I said about my team, the quarterback might just hamper you from being, one of the top three teams. But other than that, his team's pretty good. Waddle had a bad week, or not as good of a week. I think he still had a pretty good week last week, but it's basically the Waddle versus Saquon battle.
Yeah, I will say, and there's a lot of Wentz hate going around from you and Libby. He's the sixth ranked quarterback right now. He had a bad week last week, but his stat line from the first 2 weeks is not bad. He may not be a great NFL quarterback, but he's sometimes is an okay fantasy quarterback. So I wouldn't be all negative on Carson Wentz just yet.
I think, and I can look back because I do have it historically put down. I believe, yeah, I had Carson Wentz last week as a positive waiver wire pickup for $2. I
Yeah.
he every single week I watch the highlights of the Commanders, and it's just like he is terrible. But like you said, better fantasy quarterback than real life quarterback.
Yep.
Um, Trending up, I went pretty chalk on this one. I went Stefan. I mean, he's got a team that every week you're like, maybe he'll gut this one out. And now he's 3-0. And the more I look at the team, the more I like it.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. He's got a pretty soft points against. I think it's only 280.
Yeah.
But he's winning matchups, and that's what matters. I think mine is Wes, and we'll maybe get into this more later. But I
Yeah.
think that Wes started off slower, but is trending up. And Libby even talked his team up too, that he's got a good team except for his quarterback, and it looks like he's got Trevor Lawrence in his lineup now over the Captain
Which,
Kirk. So
yeah,
um,
I think that's going to be a positive boost for him because I mean, especially this last week, Jaguars look decent.
yeah,
Trending down, I think we have the same. I have Seth. Oh, and you have Drew. Yeah.
I have Drew.
So Seth, we talked about this last week. We almost basically predicted the bad side, the trick or treat part of Seth's lineup, which is if his top three players don't just go off, he's in trouble. And last week, I think he scored 69 points.
Nice.
Uh, his bench had 51, so it could just be a matter of him starting the right people. But he did almost have a bench outscoring starters, which is we should come up with a name for that because if it ever did happen or ever has happened, that's absolutely incredible. And he was within 20 points.
You
So
should
that's unreal.
should
Herbert going forward is going to be banged up.
yeah.
Um, so if you chop 5 points, 5 to 10 points off of his, well, probably 5 points per week off of his, he's going to struggle. So yeah, Seth, trick or treat. He's probably still going to win a decent amount of games when those guys go off, but probably will end up around 500, I think.
And I think that's a good point on Seth. I had Drew because he is the right now he owns the dubious Luke Shazer Award for most points against. It's at
Oh,
372, and like I was just saying, the lowest is well, actually Wes has 275, so he's got 100 more points against than other teams. And that doesn't, I mean, that's luck. It all comes down to luck and matchups. But right now, he's just drawing tough matchups, and his lineup hasn't been able to produce enough. And it's a tough place to be. And I don't really see any studs on his lineup that can produce consistently.
yeah, I mean, Waddle, but
That's about it, though.
yeah, I'm pulling it up here. So Drew, spoiler alert, is not in my power rankings, which would be a drop of 3 places for him. Whereas Seth, I had top 3, and you will see that he is no longer in the top 3 and fell farther. So that would be my edge there. Let me see. Yeah, Judy's not great. James Robinson's pretty solid. Joe Mixon, Khalil Herbert. So Drew he kind of has the opposite of some teams here where he has really solid running backs, and just needs what do we have? Hawkinson and Judy to be decent. But yeah, his running backs are pretty good, especially if Khalil Herbert's good the rest of the season. Breakout player. So who do we expect to be the best player in fantasy for this week? Last week, who did I have?
I had Jamar Chase, and that did not go super well. He got a touchdown, maybe 10 points, but not exactly a breakout performance. Sorry, Tom.
I had Jalen Hurts and Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is terrible because Kirk Cousins is terrible, and it drives me insane because now I almost watch the Vikings as closely as I watch the Packers. It's not healthy. But I will take one for Hurts. Hurts is just going to be a force going forward. I think he's going to end up being the fantasy MVP of the year, if not the NFL MVP.
All right.
I think Lamar might have something to say about the NFL MVP. But those two by the end of the year are going to be QB1, QB2, and it's going to be like a toss-up.
Hard to disagree.
Yeah. Breakout player for this week, I kind of went chalk again. I had Saquon. Saquon is, I think, running back 2.
Mm-hmm.
He just looks like he's all the way back from 3 years of basically hiatus back to being consistent top 5 running back every week. And then unfortunately for you, my breakout player is Joe Burrow. My real breakout player. Saquon's the chalk. My kind of gutsy pick is Joe Burrow, and that'll be the one that I stick to. So if I brag about one next week, if Joe Burrow goes off, I'll take that. Saquon, yeah, whatever. He's going to be great every week.
Sure.
Joe Burrow. I mostly matchup related. I forget who he's playing. The Dolphins. So
okay.
Expecting, and it's Dolphins tonight. So ugly Thursday night matchup. Hopefully it doesn't go defensive ugly, and it just goes that the defense doesn't show up and they just sling it around the park. But a matchup of the 2 best wide receiver cores for each team, because Cincinnati has sick wide receivers, and so do the Dolphins.
The Bengals are wearing their all white uniforms with the white helmets, which are very good. So that might help them.
So black stripes.
Yeah, which is going to be cool. And I simply just didn't need Joe Burrow, so I was just looking for my highest trade. I wish him all the best. When I have Lamar, I don't really need to sub him out for anybody else.
I will say this, and I hope Tom does watch this because he will completely agree with this, is that Joe Burrow is the most Tom Nauman quarterback in the league. Like when I think of Joe Burrow, I'm like, I bet you Tom loves Joe Burrow. I do not know that for a fact, but of all the quarterbacks that start in the league, besides Cooper Rush, I bet you he likes Joe Burrow.
Besides Cooper Rush. Okay, yeah, I was actually if we were gonna do waiver wire pickups or hyping, this is a joke, but hyping bad players, Cooper Rush would be on there, but I'm not actually gonna do that. My breakout player, and I have to lift up my fellow 0-3 team, but I think George Kittle is gonna break out. He's finally coming back from injury. He started for the first game last week and put up a few points, but I think he's playing the Rams, and those teams always duke it out pretty good. So I think that George Kittle is probably going to have, I'm going to go hot take and say 20+ point performance from George Kittle.
All right. Well, let's hope Garoppolo knows the playbook by now. Yeah. Did you hear about the story that they didn't give him the playbook while they were trying to figure out whether or not to trade him or not? So over the offseason, so he just doesn't know what they were going to run.
I didn't hear that, but that's not surprising, and that just makes it even better.
Yeah. All right. Power rankings. So do this. I'll give you any of the changes because I have it written down from last week. Changes that were made. So go ahead with your 8 through 4.
8 through 4. Number 8 is Seth. Number
Yep.
7 is Sam. Number 6 is Libby. And number 5 is you.
Yep. And then 4.
Number 4 is Ross. Ross falls out of the top 3, but I think since these are power rankings and he's trending a little bit downward, we gotta put some other people in that top 3 area.
Yeah. So the changes from that are Ross went from 1 to 4. He just got a loss. I mean, it happens. Still scored a decent amount of points. He'll be in the top 3 again. Had to give a nod to the person that he played over him to bump him into the top 3. But you could probably call it a tie for 3rd there. I stayed consistent at 5. Drew dropped out of the top 8. I had alluded to that previously. He was at 6. He was replaced by Sam, who we now had at 7. Sam definitely trending up, especially with Jalen Hurts. If you have one of the best players in fantasy, you're going to be a tough team all year. Seth he's the biggest move from 3 to 8.
Yep.
And Libby drops from 4 to 6. Again, between me and Libby, it's kind of a toss-up. If I played Libby this week, I wouldn't be surprised if I lost or if I won. So top 3, Lucas at 3. Again, we said he was pretty close with Ross, so we basically just put him side by side here. Lucas's team is really solid. Played him last week. Very tight game between him and I. But I think him going forward looks like he's probably going to be scoring 115 to 130 points every week. And if Derrick Henry can just keep staying alive, he'll be right there. And then our surprise is Wes at 2. This was a case of power rankings jujitsu where Lucas and Ross are probably, like we said, it should be in the top 3, but they played each other last week. So we had to rank one lower than the other. So Ross had to be ranked lower than Lucas. But then I didn't want to put Lucas at 2. So I had to put someone else at 2, and we put Wes at 2. And it's just what it is.
These aren't standings, they're power rankings. The standings show something different. These are just the hype.
And it's like when you're filling out an NCAA bracket, and sometimes those little numbers that are next to the teams from where their standings are, 12/5, the matchups. Sometimes you just look at your power rankings and you go, I think Wes is 2. And you have no reason for it. And you just put him at 2.
It's just a solid team up and down. We've talked about it already, but I see very few holes here.
And then we got the easy number 1, Stefan. He's the only undefeated team. He gets to claim the top rank. He has a very good team that is going to be tough to beat every single week. For our sake, I hope he stays undefeated because it's nice to just right at the top at that number 1, just write it down. You got it.
If you stay undefeated, you get to stay number 1.
Yeah. Once somebody beats you, then we'll figure it out. But until then, keep winning. I do. So as we wrap up again, I'll just go through it. Stefan 1, Wes 2, Lucas 3, Ross 4, Luke 5, Libby 6, Sam 7, Seth 8. Drew, welcome to the not ranked list, even though you still got mentioned. The other 4 teams, you're probably never going to get mentioned.
That's fine.
It's the bottom 4 are pretty rough. Pretty rough. Did you want to motivate your troops for the Owen? Are you the only non-win team?
Kranz and I both haven't. Wait, hang on. Is it just me?
Is Kranz won?
Oh no, both Kranz and I are 0-3. I I don't have any hype for my team. I like Lamar Jackson, and I'm at the point where I just fired away some trade offers and waiver requests, and I'm just trying to change things up. We'll see what happens.
So my follow-up question to you there would be, just to keep it interesting, what what's the asking price for Lamar Jackson? Let's say week 6, you're like 1-5, probably not going to make the playoffs. Somebody comes up to you with an offer. You're like, maybe I can get to 500 if I really rip someone off. What do you feel is a good qualified offer for that situation?
It's a good. I hadn't really thought about that, but I would say that nobody on my team is untradeable at this point. Especially since I paid a lot of money for Lamar and probably am not gonna keep him. But it would be the equivalent of I would need a top five running back or a top five wide receiver, and then two other starting lineup worthy players, I think.
So, I mean, you can go that way. The other way would be future stacking. And if
Ah,
you could
yes,
grab someone that you would, because you're going to have two keepers, would you
that's
like,
true.
yeah, I could see if you wanted like Drake London would probably be a really intriguing chip for you because I think he was relatively cheap.
Yeah,
And next year could be a top 5 wide receiver with how well he's played this year. So all of you out there that have potentially good keepers for Tim, you can probably poach Lamar Jackson from
that's
him.
it's interesting. This is like the GM going into the full rebuild mode because we have the keepers and building for the future.
Yeah, I love
It might get to that point for me.
the more that I've thought about it, the more I've liked it for teams that are really crappy because you can. I mean, you could do the same. You could do the same thing if you're crappy and get two halfway decent guys to keep for next year, and like in your case, dump Lamar, who, well, you probably didn't pay a lot for Lamar, so
It
you
was
just,
$15.
yeah, you're going to keep him next year. So that's one there. But yeah, something to think about for the future. Um, we did not mention it at the top. Lucas was the high point for this last week. I reached out to him via email for a comment, did not respond. I also did that
Mm.
this morning. So it is not like he was blowing me off. I just got to it really late.
If you score the highest points this week, holler at us and we'll book some time for you if you want to be on. And Libby, you can come on if you'd like to.
Yeah, and yeah, we'll plan on we'll check with Libby, see if we can get him for next week because apparently he's got some hot fire to spit. And we do encourage somebody to jump on with us. It'll be more fun, get more conversations going, and it won't be just me complaining about my team the entire time, which I try not to do, but my team is interesting, so that's what it is.
I'd say there's less complaining and more intrigue with your team than other years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Mr. Buttside to the moon, baby.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
All right. Looking forward to week 4. Uh, and we'll catch you guys all next week. Thank you.
Football.